Hello and welcome to episode 109 of the Alfa Romeo Driver Podcast, brought to you by the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. I'm Guy Swarbrick, and with me this month I have 75 Registrar Nick Suiter, 159 Registrar Lindsey, and Giulia Registrar Celi to talk about their models' 40th, 20th, and 10th anniversaries respectively. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Guy.
Cool. So we've got three models which are, I think, very different in nature. They all kind of sit in the same niche, in that kind of three-box executive saloon kind of niche that Alfa has been so successful in the past. Before we start talking about the cars and the importance of the anniversary and a little bit about their history, I just thought we'd just get a bit of context in terms of your Alfa ownership history. And I will start with Nick, partly because you're representing 75, which is the oldest of the three, and partly because I can then gauge how much of the podcast we've got left, because I know your history is going to take a while. So Nick, tell us about your Alfa history.
Yeah, the potted history is mainly all Alfetta-based cars, which the 75 is, sprinkled with a Sud Sprint and an Alfa Sud, and I've had about 35 Alfas in total, 4 GTV6s, similar amount of 75s, and Giuliettas. I've had about 4 of those as well, 116 series. Yeah, so a lot.
And 4 Giuliettas is a significant proportion of the UK sales.
Well, I don't know. I think they sold more of those 116 Giuliettas than you think. So, yeah, my starting off in Alfas really was a friend of mine had an Alfa Sud, and that's what got me into them. And somehow, I don't know why I ended up not having Alfa Suds. I ended up with an Alfetta Saloon as my first Alfa. And then from that, I ended up getting Giuliettas, a couple of those. Then I ended up racing one. That was my third one. Then I raced a GTV6. And I've had 2 road GTV6s and 2 race car GTV6s. And similar amount of 75s, sort of split 50-50 between race cars and road cars. And I've currently got 3 75s. A self-built turbocharged one, a 24-valve powered track car, and a standard 3-litre 12-valve Cloverleaf.
So fittingly, you've got 75% of all the 75s you've owned.
Yes, well worked out.
Maths genius, me.
Yeah.
If Debbie's got 159% of all the 159 she's ever owned, we're in big trouble. Good. So, Debbie, I know you're a multiple Alfa household. Tell me about the fleet and the history.
Well, it all started when I finally passed my test 8 years ago. Learned to drive in a 147.
8 years ago, so you'd have been 13. That's too young to...
Oh, you're so sweet. Sadly not. Yeah, I was a late starter. What can I say? So, yeah, we had the 147. That didn't last very long at all. And had we have known a bit more on the mechanics of a Alfa, we would have probably worked on it a bit better than we did. We then went on to get our first 159, which was 1.9. Sadly got written off. Moved on to a Giulietta, and husband liked it. I didn't. So I always said I wouldn't go back to a 159 after the first one got written off. But yeah, the bug was there. So went and got the current 159 and the 2.4, which we've now had for 6 years. And I am enjoying maintaining it, actually.
It's a lovely engine, that 2.4. I always feel really weird saying it's a lovely diesel engine, but it is a lovely diesel engine.
It is. Oh, yes.
Gobs of torque, I think, is the technical term.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
Talking of torque, Andrew.
Well, I'm afraid compared to my peers here, my history is not as long and articulated. That said, when I bought my current Giulia Portfolio, that was in August 2021. I was driven by different factors, but there's also something of some unfinished business that started off 45 years before with my father, who got himself a Sud. Like many of the owners, now I was relatively small, so I got some memories about it. But one thing I can't figure out, I think it didn't really last that long. I did remember him moaning about the holes of rust developing. And I don't know if that was what eventually prematurely ended the life of the Sud in the family. And that's why I said unfinished business. Said, okay, fast forward 45 years. Let's see how things are now dealing. And obviously having read quite a lot about the Giulia and especially about the quad without saying anything to the missus, in order not to, I went straight in. And one of them was there actually in the showroom. It's a 1-year-old model. So practically wasn't brand new. But nevertheless, it was with so low mileage that it was kept in the showroom. And trust me, they're very clever with the spotlights in showrooms. The way that this thing appeared in there, I said, that's it, done. I'm sold. So that's where we are. And since then, literally no regrets. I see myself often having to push back on the mantra that as soon as you start looking at an Alfa, it will dismantle itself in pieces, because I have had no issues whatsoever, apart from a damn battery that decided to have one of the components to break down. And before we got to that analysis, it took endless attempts to jumpstart it. But nevertheless, other than that, it's been a very reliable rocket ship.
Although you've been spending money on it as though it was unreliable.
Well, no, I think there's another matter. Is obviously going, how can I tweak this? How can I tweak that? And obviously...
if it's not going to break, you might as well fix something anyway.
Maybe I think I got in my bucket list the fact of possibly try to start self-serving some of that. But then I came to realize that you need the right tools, the right infrastructure. You definitely need a ramp, but I'm obviously relying on some of the experts, and I tend to go to a well-known specialist to have things taken care of. But to say it's not just the servicing, sometimes it's just how can we improve that? How can we improve that? So that's what leads then the bills to come up.
Yeah.
But no regrets at all.
Good. So let's talk about the cars. So Nick, yours is the oldest. So tell us a little bit about the anniversary and what appeals to you about the car. We'll talk about your personal experiences with cars you've owned a bit later, but what is it about the 75 that has led you to get 4 of them?
For me, of all the Alfetta-based cars, they drive the best. So, and they should, because they were the last iteration of that vehicle. So a lot of the foibles of the vehicle, the poor gear change was resolved, for example. And and they've got a better driving position because you can adjust the steering wheel for rake as well as up and down height. So you can get the steering wheel closer to you. So you do get a slightly better driving position than a normal Alfetta-based car. And they've got good ride. Torsion bar front suspension gives you a good ride. And I still think my 75, which I was out in, I try and use it all day, every day in the summer. It's still better than a modern car in some respects. Obviously, the quality of the interior it won't be with the plastics and such like. And they're better built because they bothered to make an effort, Alfa, with the corrosion protection. The whole cars were dipped, which the previous cars weren't. They were hand painted, so they last longer. And I think that's one of the reasons that I've ended up with those and not kept the earlier ones, is because there's more of them around. They've survived. And they're easy to look after, and there's lots of parts available for them.
And of course, it's always easy to work out how old the 75 is just by looking to see how old Alfa is this year and taking 75 off.
Yes.
It was slightly confused me when I was younger, knowing that was the case, the 75, trying to work out how the 90 had come out before it. The 90 should have come out 15 years after the 75. But anyway.
Yes, so should the 159 have been the 90 then?
Just trying to do the maths. Yeah, it would have been close, wouldn't it? Actually, I think the 156 would have been closer, although it would have had to have been called the 101, which would have then got confusing.
Yeah, 95, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that kind of the parentage, because you talked about the Alfetta series, and obviously a lot of our older members will be familiar with that. But the whole transaxle thing was a big shift for Alfa, wasn't it? So tell us a little bit about what led to the 75 eventually.
Well, I think Alfa wanted to improve on the 105 series cars, and the previous models to that, the 750 and the 101 and the 105, have very, very similar suspension, front suspension, double wishbone, live rear axle, coil springs. And I think they wanted to go for a better handling car with a better weight distribution. So, and I suppose to move on from the 105 series and make the new model stand out and something else that you want to aspire and acquire. So by moving the gearbox complete with the clutch to the rear of the car on the 4-cylinder cars gives you a 50-50 weight distribution. You get a 52-48 with the V6 because it's slightly heavier than the 4-cylinder engine. The downside of that is the prop shaft's running at engine speed. Then you've got that long throw for the gear change. So, yeah, they're a very, very safe car, I think, to drive. They're very neutral handling. Yes, they understeer, but all road cars understeer for safety reasons. And they're incredibly well balanced. Very easy to drive on the limit and very rewarding to drive.
Yeah, I think Andrew may have a different view about all road cars. Understeering is ever driven the Giulia in race mode on the road.
Well, I think we witnessed a few episodes in recent Nats, didn't we, Guy?
Yeah, but yes, I did. I take the point. That's the way they're engineered to drive in normal conditions.
Yeah.
Okay. Debbie, the 159. So I remember, this is a car that when I first saw it at I think it was at the Geneva Motor Show, I was a 156 owner at the time, and I thought, yeah, got to have one of those next. But the press were quite critical. I think it was Sniff Petrol had a gag where they had a picture of 156, and then they had another picture of 156, but with the rear lights turned upside down, with a caption about Alfa's expensive restyling job. Mm-hmm. So what is it that you said before we started the episode, you said that you still thought they looked fresh and modern?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is after 20 years?
Because they spent the time designing it, I presume, because it's the lines, it's the wide body, how grounded it looks. It's got that aggressive stance. Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't look like it's 20 years old. It's just got those nice sweeping lines, and it is one of those cars, along with every Alfa owner would say this, you always glance back at it and think, what a car. So yeah, I mean, it was obviously a bit longer and wider than its predecessor, the 156. And I think that helped with the whole modern saloon, bringing it up to date.
I think if you look at a 3 Series or an Audi A4 of the same kind of era, there was a coupe version of both and there was a convertible version of both, but they were both kind of clumsy and looked like a squashed or decapitated version of the saloon car.
Yeah.
To me, one of the things that speaks most highly about the styling on the 159 is that the Spider and the coupe, they're clearly part of the same family, but they don't just look like, they're hacked around versions of the saloon. The front end just kind of seamlessly blends into the Spider and the coupe, but the Brera body. When I had my 159 Sport Wagon, a couple of times I would be driving along and I'd look in the rearview mirror and there'd be a 159 behind me. And I think, oh, that's nice. And I think, oh, I'm in one of those.
Yeah, definitely. They are very individual, although we all share that great front end. And that was what won me over, actually, when looking for a car. And they're just really nice to drive. I feel grounded and safe, and you can throw it round corners and you don't feel like you're going to fall over, even though it is a big, heavy car. It's brilliant, and long may they be on the road. And
probably one of the biggest differences, apart from the fact that the 75 was referred to for years as the last rear-wheel drive Alfa, which then the Giulia made that no longer the case. So apart from being front-wheel drive, I guess the other big difference is the 75 was around for quite a long time, as we'll hear when we talk to Andrew about an anniversary. I think will surprise some people in terms of how long it is. The 159 was really not around for very long, was it?
No, not at all. So yeah, it hit the UK in 2006 and they stopped making it in 2011, I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, there wasn't that many made really. And they did. There was a big difference in price when they were out new, ranging from sort of 19,000 up to 26, I think it was. Yeah, and it's a shame that actually they didn't have a longer spell. But I think that's what makes them what they are today. There's not that many of them. They stand out from the crowd, and the people that own them putting more time and effort into keeping them on the road because they are that unique.
And we won't hold Andrew personally responsible, but the Giulia was part of the reason for that short life. Or it was part of the reason for the big gap between the two, because they killed the 159 off early to bring in a replacement that they then killed and started from scratch and built the Giulia. So,
but you know what? I quite like the Giulia, and if for whatever reason, and hopefully not because I'm going to keep this thing on the road as long as humanly possible, Giulia would be my next thing. Having sat in one in the showroom, I felt so cool.
So Andrew, Giulia.
Yeah, Giulia. So interestingly about the life of the 159, because again, it's 10 years now and we are still sort of celebrating a model that is still in production, not for long, but still. When I went to do, I did some history research. And what I found interesting, what I came out was this, that around 2013 and 14, FCA, obviously they owned at that time both Ferrari and Alfa, needed or thought it was time to revive, and I thought this is interesting, revive Alfa Romeo as a premium performance brand to compete with BMW, Audi, and Merc. And this is where it gets interesting in the sense that this led to the creation of a dedicated team of engineers, which, as we know, they took one platform, the one we all know as the Giorgio platform. Here we have to thank someone like Sergio Macchione for having really a massive vision, and say, okay, we're going to do this properly, because we're not just looking at what we're going to put under the bonnet, but we're going to start off from the dynamics of it, how this thing, operates, and weight distribution. Okay, rear-wheel drive, and so on. And I think I could be biased, but if after 10 years, nothing has changed under the bonnet, they may have done some tweaks on the exhaust system because of, obviously, regulations, where there's noise or emissions. They may have done more work on the interior. Why? Because life goes on. Possibly for me, it's not a massive deal whether I have a touchscreen or not, but possibly for the younger generation of buyers, they would like to have that sort of, this sounds like there needs to be some gaming experience inside the car that goes along with what the car is actually meant to do. And I do not stop learning about even those small tweaks that they did since it was launched 10 years ago. I got the model year 19, which for those who are familiar with is the model year that ultimately was the last time you saw a non-touchscreen infotainment system. And then we moved on to the more evolved ones. But even there, when you start reading the reviews of the magazine, sometimes I do get slightly annoyed, because probably they know that there is, say, the mid-20-year-olds, if they can afford that, I don't know, early 30s, that possibly.
If they can, we hate them. But yes, I think some of them can. But
they get to sort of the base. So nothing to say about dynamics, let alone engine, because I'm not just putting the V6 in there. Let's think about the 2-liter. In both variants, okay, the Sprint, which was detuned, and the Veloce, which was obviously what is still in production. They get to the infotainment and they start literally beating up even the most recent, the model year 23, because it doesn't keep up with the standards that the Germans has established and so on. And that's where you say, yeah, well, it depends on whether or not you want to spend your time driving a car or playing with the bloody settings. I don't know. This is where I get really sort of opinionated, I must say. But all in all, I got some feedback from some of the guys that are part of a bit of a WhatsApp group, and they're all register members, the Giulia register. And I got them all from, the 2-liter Sprint to the 2-liter Veloce, all the way up to, as you know, we got Alan with his GTAM. And there is an emotional kind of connection that gets established. I don't know if that was thanks to how clever these guys, the design team, was at the time. But with any Alfa, like Debbie said, they create something that Alan said his GTAM is part of the family at the end of the day. I got Gavin with his Sprint, which is no longer a Sprint because of the various remaps he's done. But you look at it, it's spectacular. And when it turns on, I think it's the best sounding 4-cylinder engine I can think of. So these are the kind of things. My worry, in fact, knowing that soon there will be a replacement, is that first, we're no longer going to have an exclusive platform, which now currently is shared by both Giulia and Stelvio, which gives all the advantage in terms of dynamics and it behaves. And I have to say, the thing is like maneuvering a dart when it comes down to, say, more twisty bits and things like that. And now we're obviously, for economies of scale, we have to align to the fact that the next generation will be based on a much wider platform shared with many different brands.
Yeah, it depends where you come at that from, Andrew, because Giorgio was an Alfa platform, but it's in 3 Jeeps, it's in 2 Maseratis. So it is a shared platform. It's just one that Alfa shared with other brands in the portfolio. And the Stella Large platform has been designed by largely the same team of engineers that designed Giorgio. So although it's going to be used by Dodge and Chrysler before it's used by Alfa. It is, to a large extent, as far as I can tell, an Alfa platform. So fingers crossed, I think is all we can do at this stage.
Yeah. The first one to come out would be obviously the revamped Stelvio, so it'll be interesting to see how that shapes up to be. But in general, okay, I got the V6, the one that there's a lot of myth behind it in terms of, was it actually developed by Ferrari? No, it wasn't. It was inspired. But nevertheless, it's when Nick also mentioned about the 75, so when he put his foot down, same thing applies to me. The character, and sometimes you're saying, where is it? I got this lag. When it's going to come in, and when it comes in, trust me, it does come in, and you know about it, Guy, because you also drove them, and yeah, it just put that big smile on your face in terms of that. And as long as you look after it, I don't know how many times I've seen German cars with the emergency lights going on the hazard lights on the emergency lane of a motorway, rather than possibly seeing an Alfa. Now you could argue there's far less Alfas around that they're German cars, but
yeah. But I think you said earlier on that there's not been many mechanical changes, and I think that is testament to the engineers. Yeah. I mean, it's up 10 horsepower, but on the very latest ones, but the torque's exactly the same. Probably the only significant mechanical change on the Quadrifoglio is the mechanical limited slip diff in the latest cars. The run-out cars, I guess.
So speaking to those who tend to, let's say, mess around with the software and everything else, they did confirm that in various iterations, probably they started putting even a little bit more, let's say, electronic controls. Because again, as you pointed out, you want to go without traction control. Okay, hold your breath. Depends on whether you put your foot down on a straight line or where you put your foot down on a bend. Now, apparently they did a lot of that. So now, obviously, the first, second gears are very much kept at bay for preserving the gearbox and but also preserving the health and safety of the driver, let's put it this way. And then there was the introduction of, obviously, for emission, the GPF components in the exhaust system that obviously have apparently, because I haven't driven one of the more recent ones, have obviously dampened a little bit the character, especially, in the short bursts. But then after that, it all becomes the same. But you're right, absolutely right. They have not changed. And not only that, now that the rumors are that the next generation will not necessarily be electric only, guess what? They're still considering developing further.
One of the two options, I believe, alongside the four-cylinder 3-litre turbo, isn't it? Which is...
I've read about, obviously, they want to see what else they can do with the existing 2.9 and take it from there, obviously. If that's going to end up in a quad that is not going to be 1,000 horsepower because it's just only electric.
Well, apparently they've stopped talking about the 1,000 horsepower electric version as well. I'm not sure that will happen. So the worst thing about the replacement, apart from how much we all love the current Giulia, the worst thing about the replacement is it's definitely not going to come until at least next year. So in 10 years' time, when we're doing the anniversary podcast for that, it would have been lovely if we could have done 10, 20, 40 and 50 years in one podcast. But we're not going to be able to do that because it will be 10, 21, 41 and 51.
And obviously something will have to change even with how the registrar is defined and the register is called, because it's no longer going to be the new Giulia.
Yeah, it'll be the really new Giulia. Unless they come up with a different name and don't call it Giulia, which wouldn't be particularly surprising. So we're back on anniversaries. So what I'd like to do to close, and we'll start with Nick, is just talk about what we're going to do in these anniversary years to celebrate the cars. So, Nick, anything that you've done so far to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the 75, or anything that you've got planned?
The main one is a display at National Alpha Day. We're going to have a prominent position, maybe in the hangar, if we have the hangar again. Or there's somewhere else that John's talked about, because I obviously thought you would just put us in front of the hangar like he did with the GTVs last year. But he suggested somewhere else, and it slipped out. It hasn't slipped my mind exactly where it is. But he suggested somewhere even nicer. Won't have a rusty hangar doors in the background for the photographs.
So that's the main focus event-wise. There's also a very comprehensive history of the of the car in the June issue of the magazine, which will be out in around about 2 weeks' time.
So I've already done some stuff at other car shows. Spring Alpha Day, we organised a car at the NEC. We got a car there.
The restoration show.
Yes. And yeah, watch this space. We've obviously got my feature coming out in a magazine, and I'm going to try and organise something for the autumn as well.
We should actually use this as a test to see whether Mr. Griffiths listens to the podcast.
Right.
So I think as well as a dedicated 75 display at National Alpha Day, we should have a 10, 20, 40 75 159 Giulia display somewhere just to celebrate the fact that we've got 3 anniversaries over 4 decades all happening at the same time. But I'm not going to ask him. I'm just going to see whether he suddenly suggests it because he heard it on the podcast.
Will he be bringing some detailing kit?
Oh, undoubtedly. and he'll publish something in detailing, and I'll buy all of his recommendations, and then they'll sit in the garage unopened next to all his other recommendations. So
if we could have access to the venue the day before, we could bring all our cars and he can spend Saturday detailing them ready for Sunday.
Yeah, so I think all of that will happen apart from the very last bit. So we will have access to the venue the day before. You will be able to bring your cars, and if you need them cleaning, you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
Debbie, I know you've been very active with events around the 159, and I know you sent me a chat message while we were talking to Nick to remind me to get you to mention the other member of your Alpha family.
Oh, yeah. Otherwise,
well, the other 2 members, because there's a big one and a tiny one.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, we've obviously got our actual Mito, but we do have our miniature cars that have obviously been around at various shows, which is a 159 model that matches mine and a Mito that matches my husband. So it's like his and her cars in model versions and real.
Which I've managed to avoid standing on.
Yeah, I need to practice my driving skills on the model.
So anyway, anniversary events.
Yeah, it's been a busy one. I thought I'd try and get in early with our celebrations just because obviously when show season starts, it gets a bit hectic and all the weekends tend to fill up. So one of our official members had a little photo shoot with Auto Italia magazine early in March, I think it was, or April. We then did a mini drive and meet with a select. It was called an intimate gathering with some of the members and they had various model types of the 159, and we went to Goodwood, just parked up there, took some photos and then had a coffee and a chat and went on our way. That was leading up to our, as I call it, the main event, where we went to Silverstone Museum, and it was great because we sort of dominated the car park, and I was like a kid in a candy store, as they say, when there was 23 of them all lined up, and I don't think I've ever seen that many in one place, just looking as they did, and I was just like, yes. And everybody that was there, they're just a lovely bunch of people. And we're from all walks of life. And, you know, we were just chit-chatting. Actually, we stood out there for quite a long time, to the point we all got a bit cold due to the wind. Went in, had a coffee, mooched about the museum. And then a few of us went for a meal at the Piston Club afterwards. So we had this convoy, but we had some time to kill. So we stopped off at the British Motor Museum just to park up in the car park because the building's quite a nice backdrop.
Whereas the contents is a bunch of assorted sheds that I spent most of my youth pushing around the UK.
But it was really lovely because when we were leaving, we were all lining up in our little convoy. We've got our Italian flags flailing and everything like that. And there was these 2 guys in Jaguar T-shirts, and they were taking pictures of us. So I sort of hopped out and I went, all right, lads. And they were like, yeah, lovely looking cars. I can't believe you've seen this many in one go. And I went, happy snapping. Meal was lovely. I did party bags for the members with little gifts in them. I am going to plan something later in the year. Obviously, we are going to try and do something for NAD, but obviously with recent events, Vista discussions and things are going a little bit slower, but that's to be expected. So it's a case of watch this space. And I do put things on the website page and in, Instagram, Facebook. And I've got quite an active bunch. So it's nice to have the engagement from the members. because to start with, it seemed a little bit, and I was like, oh, but no, they are a good bunch. So yeah, we're just going to keep the party going all year. And I've told them they've got to rock up to every Alfa show. Otherwise, I'm not going to be happy.
And your article for the magazine is scheduled for August.
Yeah.
So we're just setting up Andrew now. He's got to top your events list and produce an article for October now.
Yeah, I'm sure Andrew will manage.
So what have you done and what have you got planned, Andrew?
So because it's June, I thought without reinventing the wheel, and I thoroughly enjoyed it 3 years ago when I last attended, because if I'm not mistaken, the following year it didn't take place and then last year I couldn't make it. I thought Cotswold Alfa would be, from a timing perspective, a good opportunity to get possibly as many Giulias together as we can. So made some noise through the register members by email. I got several replies back saying, okay, thanks for that. And they jumped on the air. The reason why I also chose that, because differently from the usual events where it's primarily static, you know that guy, the local section, good for them. And it probably takes a bit of organization. They tend to organize what they call the Giro, which is a bit of a local tour. Now, 3 years ago, it was a hoot because the road book, I don't know if it was done on purpose. The lefts were rights and the rights were lefts. And when you were traveling in these, and I have to say, some really nice scenery around the Cotswolds and everything else, but there was repeatedly this situation where you're driving your Alfa and in the opposite direction, there's another Alfa coming. So then you start questioning yourself, who got it right?
I seem to remember there was a village where there were roads coming in 5 different directions. And at one point, there were Alfas coming in both directions on all 5 roads in the village.
So that seems to be shaping well. I'm now trying to see whether we can have, because I'm not familiar with when the Giro has ended, where we're obviously going to gather, and that's where the static part kicks in, whether we can possibly have a dedicated parking area. I believe so. So I got in touch with John of the local section, and he's been pretty helpful so far and seems to be all good. Then what I would like to do is that the more the merrier. I'd like to then start using that event to obviously not just mingle, but try to get some thoughts about what else we could do. The reason being is that last year started going through some grand plans, which implied potentially organizing in June a trip to Italy, plus half a day, full day track at Balocco. Now, that could be my cup of tea because those who know me, I occasionally go on track with my own car. Obviously, then having to face the brunt of the cost of spares and everything else that goes with it. But the problem with that one wasn't that it would have been really good as combining a visit to the museum and then potentially going to Balocco. But then I realized that the cost, unless we really came up with, say, 25, 30, 40 people, would have been a little bit steep. And often I tend to send things out and I do get obviously different views on what could be done. There are people that are more keen just to meet up, park their car and have a chat. And then there are those who would like to also combine some bit of driving. So that's what I would like to do. And therefore, with Cotswold, possibly shape up some follow-up events that could take place in July, August, and so on. That's the plan.
Maybe get in touch with Daniel, who organised the Welsh.
Yeah, that would. Yeah, I was you're right. I was actually thinking about that.
He seems to have done a cracking job on the first 2 years of that.
Yeah,
so,
I think that could be a good idea.
Model-specific one. Brilliant. Look, thank you, everybody. It's lots of stuff going on. I think some really good reasons to celebrate the 10, 20 and 40-year anniversaries. I sadly won't get to do the Giro this year because I'm going to be in the Middle East, but I will be at National Alfa Day. So hopefully see you all then. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Guy.
See you again soon. Thank you.
And Nick may have said thank you, but he's on mute.
I did unmute. I thought I must have double clicked it. Can I just say about the 159, which I think is a great car. Should have made it for longer, especially the sport wagon, because I've always wanted one. And I owned a Giulia. It's the newest Alfa I've owned, best Alfa I've owned from a construction point of view, quality of materials and everything. Fantastic cars. And even the 159's got a great interior in them, much better than the earlier Alfas. So, yeah, we've got some great cars between us. Yeah,
I love my sport wagon.
You know what, though? I think we are all very passionate about our particular models, though, and then Alfa in its whole. And that's just how we work. We all respect each other and our models, and we all love each other's models as much as we love our own. So
even the Arna. I've got to save that because Dave will be listening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
you.
That's all we have time for in this episode. We'll be back in 5 weeks' time on Sunday, the 6th of July. Episode 110 will be available to download from 1:30 p.m. from iTunes, YouTube, Podcast Addict, Spotify, the club's website, and everywhere else good podcasts are found. Until then, stay safe.